Hey people, welcome to the channel, and in this case I want to talk about what's the best choice for inexperienced shooters, for people that are not familiar with firearms and yet they need to defend themselves, yet they find themselves in a situation where they need to handle a firearm for self-protection, for defending the community, and yet it's not someone that ideally would have the training necessary. Now, let me make this perfectly clear. Most people watching this that do have firearms don't have said training either. So there's a lot of hopium. There's a lot of, oh, but I shot with my uncle who knew a guy that was special forces, whatever, right? And I encourage you to get training, professional training by a qualified instructor, not just any clown, which there's a lot of them out there, but get training with a qualified instructor that has a solid reputation within the community that is going to be absolutely worth every single buck. A lot of people think, oh, but with that money I could buy myself another gun. With that money I could buy myself 2 more guns or ammo or all of this stuff that I need for the end of the world. No, your money is a lot better invested in proper training in a good school with a good instructor. That is priceless. Up until the moment in which you actually pay for it and get it, you don't understand how critical it is. The difference between someone that has had professional training and someone that hasn't is enormous. If you can have more of it, better. I've done the beginner's class, intermediate class, advanced classes, shotgun classes, rifle classes, instructor class, shooting from within and around vehicle classes, dynamic entry classes, and a bunch of our stuff. That gives you a level of knowledge that the average person that thinks he knows because he shot with his uncle does not even begin to understand, let alone someone that does this professionally and trains like this every single week for years and years, maybe for decades. That is someone on the more elite level of fighting with a gun. I don't expect that, but at least a few classes, definitely something well within the possibilities of everyone that wants to be armed. So, having said that, my advice is invest a little bit of that money in getting proper training. You don't have that, and maybe you don't have the money for it. Maybe you're in a country where it is even illegal for you to get that training. Well, this is not illegal and costs like 20 bucks. In Street Survival Skills, I explain the basics on how to properly hold a gun, how to properly move with a gun, the things that I've learned in classes with very good instructors over the years. The basics I explain there. It's not the ideal situation of getting a proper course with a good instructor, which is far better. But if you put that into practice and train and you do the dry firing practice, and it's going to be putting you in a much better position than just assuming that you know what you don't, okay? Having said all of that, what is it that I recommend for someone that is inexperienced? The first thing is, well, if you're inexperienced, don't have a gun. That's madness. That's crazy. Even though most people that do own a firearm haven't had that training, they still do it, but it's not advised. But what happens when we get into the nitty-gritty, complicated mess that life is? And I'm not talking here about the fantasy. I'm not talking here about arming the neighbors for an apocalypse involving zombies or aliens or none of that nonsense. No, one of the things I've been talking lately a lot here on the channel is keep things real. Be realistic. When the hell has this ever happened to you? When was the last time you were dealing with zombies? When was the last time you went out there into the wild streets after the end of the world with your python shooting at the Walking Dead? Never happened. But you know what has happened, and it's something that has happened to me actually more than once, is this. Fernando, you have a gun? Someone broke into my house. I'm scared. Hey, that kind of thing actually happens more often than you would think. I don't know about you, maybe it's where you've lived, how dangerous it is, and crime and whatnot, but unfortunately that's something that has happened not only to me, that's something I've heard many times. And that's the moment in which you go, no, man, I can't give you a gun. You don't have a license. You don't have a permit. You would put me on the line. I mean, I could end up in jail for giving a gun to someone that hasn't got a gun permit. Depends on where you live. Maybe you live in a place where giving that to someone lands you in jail. Maybe in that same place, giving that person a shotgun is perfectly legal because it's not requiring the same kind of license. Maybe you live in a place where anyone can own any gun at any moment without any kind of documentation or permits. Maybe that person can own it but not actually carry it, which actually may be what he needs to do or what she needs to do if she is being threatened and has an angry boyfriend, some violent ex or whatnot. So all of these complications that you may be thinking, oh, this would never happen to me because blah, blah, blah. Well, you don't actually know. So if we're going to keep things real, these are real possible situations. Someone that you know, family member, neighbor, dear friend, all of a sudden that person suffers an incident, and it's a giant ass wake-up call. That person that thought you were crazy because you had more than one gun or you had any gun at all of a sudden is asking you for a gun. I mean, without mentioning anything specific, or a neighbor in Buenos Aires, right? Someone rings at the door, you open, it's your next door neighbor, crying. You have her go inside, someone broke into the house, she just came back from work, the door is busted, she's scared, it's now in the middle of the night, and what is that you do with this person? This person now has no door, is scared to death, and do you have anything that I can protect myself with? What is that you do? Well, let me know in the comments below. What would you do? What would you do if that's your neighbor? Let me put you in another situation. What if you have, say, kids? Let's say you have a daughter. You have a daughter that you love dearly, but she's not into firearms. Actually, she thinks her dad is a little bit of a gun nut. And all of a sudden, 22 years old, she has a situation like what we saw recently in the video of that poor little girl. Well, she's 22-year-old young woman dealing with a violent ex. All of a sudden, your daughter that was really never into guns, all of a sudden, she says, Dad, can you give me a gun? What would you say? No? Of course you wouldn't. Of course you would give her a gun. And you would go, but what is the best option? What is the best option for someone that suddenly needs a weapon, doesn't have the training, and you really cannot afford to just say no, because that's not an alternative for you. I mean, if it's someone that I don't know and it's someone that, some acquaintance, yeah, of course. You know what? No, I'm not giving you a gun because you're going to be putting me in a whole lot of a mess, and I really don't know you enough, and that's honestly, bro, not my problem. What happens if it's someone you want to keep safe? Best thing for me, a revolver. I've talked about this many times in similar videos. Someone with a revolver, it's just 5-6 shots. Typical revolver, 6 shots, 38, 357 Magnum. All you have to do is flinch, and it fires. With a Glock pistol, you have the empty chamber. I mean, it's basically, it's not really that much of a terrible thing if you have, let's say, your daughter, and you probably explain to her how basically guns work and so on. Maybe you even went shooting once or twice, right? And you tell her, you know what, sweetheart, you leave this gun as it is. It's already loaded. There's a round in the chamber. Keep it in the holster. And if something happens, you draw that gun and you fire. It's ready to fire. It has no safety, nothing. Basically works like a revolver. Just make sure you leave it in the holster, and that's it. Make sure you identify before you fire, because this person, your daughter, whoever it is, this person is now scared, and that person is very likely to do this, to flinch, to react in fear, and reacting in fear with a gun in your hand is not exactly what you want to do. Identify before shooting. Make sure you drill that into that person's brain, because if not, they're going to be shooting the cats, the neighbor, maybe they're going to shoot you by accident because they're scared and thought that noise was the ex that's coming after her. Very complicated, because ideally it would be someone that has good training. Most people, the enormous majority of most people, don't have that level of training. And even if they were trained by the neighbor that once talked with a Navy SEAL back in Burger King, yeah, that's not it. That's not really professional training. You have to do something else. But these situations do happen. Families, good friends, you just don't know. Let's suppose that there's a little bit more of a far-fetched sounding situation, like there's anarchy, there's violence. One thing that happened in Argentina was police went on strike nationwide for several days. And neighbors started organizing. Maybe you live in a hurricane-prone area, flooding situations where people need to organize a little bit. Neighbors need to organize so as to protect the community because there's civil unrest, because there's rioting, there's political motivated violence on the streets. Whatever's going on, all of a sudden people of your street start organizing. And there's going to be the guy that actually knows what he's doing. There's going to be someone that has a former military training guy, that he's comfortable with his Beretta 92 because that was his issued gun back then. He knows how to use an AR, so he's okay with his own AR, and you're okay with that. But then there's going to be the guy that, yeah, I have this gun from my grandpa. Okay, I have this gun because I bought it for self-protection, but I don't even know how to load it, right? Oh, I bought the Glock because I saw that the modern survivalist guy say, go buy yourself a Glock, and I bought my Glock in 9mm. Great gun. Do you actually know how to run it? Do you know what to do if there's a failure to feed, some kind of interruption? Do you know how to clear a malfunction of it? No, I have no fucking clue. Never trained any of that. Okay, then. You would have been better served with a revolver, my friend. But hey, you have the Glock. Try to get by with that. Now, if you have something like that, my advice would be semi-automatic pistol caliber carbine. That is probably the best thing you can give someone like that. It is not as simple as a revolver, but being a long gun, they're more likely to actually put a shot on target. It has very little recoil. It's actually not that heavy, yet heavy enough that with 9mm, the recoil is very manageable. With a red dot, it's pretty simple to hit something 50 meters or 50 yards away. You can put magazines of 10, 15, 20, 30 round capacity, whatever. Any Glock mag fits in there. And that's a very solid rifle. It is super reliable. It was not always super reliable. When I first got it, it had a little bit of a barb there in the bolt that needed to be polished a little bit. But when you do know guns, you know how to make these diagnostics and fit and fix whatever needs fixing and polish whatever needs polishing. And now it works flawlessly. Just runs like a drill on grease. It just works perfectly well. Okay. This is something that for someone that hasn't got a lot of training, someone that you maybe explain some basics on, you know what, dude, keep that barrel pointed down at all times and make sure of your target before shooting. And if you have to shoot, this is what you do. Is this ideal? Of course not. But let's say there's a violent situation going on in your state or in your country. You just need one more guy with a gun to cover whatever part where you cannot be. That guy probably will do a better job with that. It just works. It is simple. And at least for those 30 rounds or whatever it is that you got in there, or 15 or 20 in that magazine, those are shots you probably can count on, even though this is far from ideal. What about the guns that are often brought up and are really not ideal for someone? You know, the basic double barrel shotgun. Oh, that is super simple, is it? Kind of, not really. This is a lot more simple for someone that has, you know, the amount of force you have to do, the way in which those hammers stay cocked on the inside and it's not visible, the way in which these guns are actually intended to not be loaded and cocked and ready to go like for a long period of time, the way in which the safeties are really not all that great depending on what model specifically you're looking at. And yes, some of these old shotguns with two barrels that have exterior hammers that you can manually mount, you can manually cock. Though, I mean, it's simple, but there's a lot involved for someone that is maybe not that well suited for that gun. Maybe someone that has no training whatsoever, you know, remembering about the opening and closing of the thing and whatever safety there is, and if there's exterior hammers that need to be cocked, it can be quite messy. Another gun that is often brought up is the pump action shotgun, which is a great gun. A pump action 12 gauge, Mossberg 500, H7, those are great guns. But the thing is that as great as they are, they're more suited for someone that has already an incorporated muscle memory so as to run them properly during high stress situations. You have to manually pump for ejecting and loading each round you fire, and it is something that at the worst possible moment it may not work all that great. There's been cases in which people with almost no idea of how to run a gun use the pump action. They barely knew how to pump it and put a round in there, and they blasted someone going through the door during a break-in, and it freaking worked. So who am I to say, oh, that's not, well, it's not ideal, but it could work. I'm just going by here as simple as it gets. I'm going for maximum simplicity while still having a decent amount of follow-up shot for minimal skill. All right, this is not ideal by any means. This is not recommended by any means, but you're talking about your daughter, a loved one that needs a tool to defend themselves, and you have to find some option. These would be great for that. These would be great maybe even for someone in your own family that is not that interested in guns at all. So they went shooting a couple times, they kind of know how it works. I mean, I have these two pretty handy at all times because I know that if you don't use that one, someone could use that one and either defend themselves, defend you, cover you. It's another adult with a gun that has some minimal knowledge on how to, handle it safely, the safe administrative handling of not pointing, identifying targets, and so on. And if it happens, you have 6 rounds of .357 Magnum. That is not bad at all to defend yourself. And these other options, that's where I stand. So guys, that's basically it for now. And remember, if you want to learn more about all of this stuff, you have the channel. And as I was saying before, specifically for this, survival skills, and for the rest of the economic collapse survival stuff that is unfortunately very popular these days, Surviving the Economic Collapse. Both books available there in the links below. Take care.